When I was around 12, my sister, who's 3 years older than me, was allowed to make her own Facebook account. She met the mature age requirement of at least 13, and of course wanted to hop on one of the trendiest sites to join back in 2011. At the time, I had a total of about 2 other friends, and we liked to read the Guardians of Ga'Hoole book series and make comics about ladybugs and butterflies, so it's safe to say that from a 6th grade standpoint, I didn't really get the appeal of Facebook. I met up with my friends every day at school, and if we really needed to contact each other later on about which owl book we were reading next, there was always GChat, the IM messenger built into Gmail. Why would I bother with Facebook, where there were walls and statuses and poking, all of which seemed pointless and confusing? Well, my sister continued to use her Facebook account, and sometimes when I'd get a glance at her screen, I saw something that interested me way more than the status updates and poke requests. There on the computer would be a brightly colored screen full of animations, challenges, and levels, almost like a game? Facebook has games? I was immediately more interested in my sister's Facebook, way more than ever before, always looking over her shoulder when she'd log on. It all looked so fun. Sometimes it was a farm with little cows and blueberries and scarecrows, and sometimes it was a tank full of her very own virtual fish, something I had no interest in the real world, but felt like I just had to play with in this online game. But I was still 12, and I still wasn't even sure how Facebook worked, let alone able to meet the age requirement to have one myself. But that didn't stop me from asking. I pretty much begged my mom over and over to let me have a Facebook, and even started to just sign up without parental permission on my own a few times, but I always chickened out before creating the account because I was afraid Facebook would know that I wasn't 13 and would come swat my house or something for breaking the rules. My sister occasionally let me play some of the games on her account, probably mostly because my mom made her, but she was more often using it for the social element that it was designed for, and I felt like I wasn't getting enough time with these virtual fish that were so strangely enticing. Fortunately though, I think it wasn't even a year later that my mom finally let me sign up for a Facebook account of my own, after all of that begging and whining. Finally, I could tend my own farm and fish and whatever else the Facebook world had in store for me. The social aspect had even started growing on me too, because more and more of my non-owl book reading peers were also creating accounts and jumping on the social trend. Hi! Before we continue, I'd like to give a shout out to this video's sponsor, me. This channel has grown a lot faster than I ever thought it would, and it's thanks to everyone who takes the time to support me. I never thought I'd receive this kind of response just from talking about the things that interest me. Having all of this newfound support has made me feel a little more comfortable in coming out of my shell and making a Patreon. If you've enjoyed watching my videos and feel like you want to go the extra mile to show your support, then my Patreon is now around as a way for you to do that. And I just want to say, there is 100% no obligation or expectation for you to join. I know that not everyone has the ability to pledge to a Patreon, and all of my videos will still be posted for free here on YouTube. This is just an extra way to let me know that you like the content if you want to, but please don't feel pressured at all. I also just want to say thank you to the one person who found my Patreon before I announced it here. I seriously appreciate you going out of your way to look it up on your own. Thank you so much for being my first patron, and you don't know how much it means to me to know that there are people who are willing to support me in that way. The link to the new page will be in the description if you're interested in checking it out, but again, there's no expectation at all for you to join. Thanks for sticking around if you made it this far into the boring self-advertisement section, and now, back to Mark Zuckerberg's underground Farmville ring. So maybe you're expecting me to have quickly realized that these games weren't all that I had built them up to be, but it was actually the opposite. I'd check on these games constantly, always wanting to gain experience and build up enough in-game currency for the coolest decorations. Despite there being an energy system in place which meant that I could only perform actions in the games at a limited pace, and with a premium currency that limited what cool things I could actually buy, I was still fully dedicated to my blossoming worlds of stylized 2010s Zynga graphics and flash animations. Maybe this all seems melodramatic, but it wasn't just me. Everyone was falling down the Farmville, Fishville, Cityville, Everythingville rabbit hole that was early Facebook games. When I'd go to the local library, almost every computer would be taken by some middle to late-aged man or woman who was getting their farm tending fix. I'm sure I spammed most people in my friends list with requests to help me with certain challenges in the game, just desperate for more playtime. There was this one lady from my church who would send me requests too, and though I couldn't even remember adding her as a friend, let alone ever meeting her in real life, we became these kind of Facebook game buddies that would always send over extra lives or resources to each other. Thanks for all the help, Cindy. Hope you're doing well. These games were marketed as something fun, relaxing, and of course, Facebook exclusive. But looking back on it now, even if the original Farmville and Cafe world aren't around anymore, there's a bit of nuance to these games that I was able to completely overlook as a kid. While milking a virtual cow and feeding computer fish can be relaxing, to get to your Facebook games, you'd of course have to log into the Facebook website, the social network that every day quietly battled with others like MySpace and Twitter for your loyalty. By signing into Facebook, even if you were avoiding poke notifications and just wanted to play Treasure Isle with Cindy, you were giving Facebook your loyalty to the site over others you could be using instead. Maybe this doesn't sound all that bad because companies have used worse gimmicks to try and round up more users of their products. But Facebook isn't just a competing social media site, but also a site filled with advertisements since 2007. In the midst of being coerced into annoying your entire friends list with game requests, these relaxing games also targeted their users who were looking for a little downtime by drawing them in with fun games and also subliminally advertising to them from the sidelines. Not to mention that these games also blatantly advertised their own products through microtransactions, taunting you with the coolest farm decor you've ever seen that can only be bought with farm cash. Farm cash, of course, though being a currency itself, can only be bought with real money, and that's the real reason why Facebook wants you to share your eggs with your friends and encourage everyone else you know to do the same. Microtransactions are pretty well known in our current society, but in case you've just been beamed in from outer space and are looking for common knowledge to use to blend in, I'll quickly break them down. In some games, certain items or benefits are locked behind a paywall, and while a paywall sounds frustrating or bothersome for a game that's meant to be relaxing and free, these paywalls are usually a relatively small amount, hence the micro part of the name. Because the amount for the transaction seems mostly insignificant, paying to bypass these paywalls or premium obstructions can seem like a harmless, simple way to get what you want without much hassle or cost. Microtransactions are almost exclusively found in mobile gaming nowadays, but before smartphones hit it big, PC games were the ones to use them first. In the case of Facebook games, resources that are necessary to play the game, like water for your Farmville crops, would be purposefully limited. Facebook games would also make in-game actions take effect in real time, so while you could cook as many dishes for your Cafe World cafe as you had stoves, which I'd also just like to say I always really wished I could eat as a kid, you'd still have to wait hours to be able to actually play with them and see their benefits. Of course, if you wanted to play longer without waiting for your water tank to fill back up or for your delectable holographic meatloaf to finish cooking, you could speed up these processes with premium currency, which could also be used to buy cool cosmetics or items that otherwise enhanced gameplay. While it might seem like it's easy to avoid microtransactions through sheer willpower alone, these games and others like them made sure to condition you from the start to feel somewhat reliant on these premium currencies and the perks they could buy you. From giving players free premium currency during tutorials, to making the real-time wait times in the games take increasingly longer the more time you played and the more invested you got in your setup, microtransactions were and are always using their FOMO factor to their benefit. Instead of being marketed as simple and harmless extras, they were more often pushed as something you should desire and that will let you play the game as it was truly meant to be played, instead of as extras that were just fun but optional. FOMO stands for the fear of missing out, which microtransactions that are tied to exclusive, limited, or game-enhancing products are typically fueled by. Sure, you can avoid paying extra if you're determined to, but that premium currency is always floating around the game in different areas, and your friend's farm that they first invited you to play from has really cool stuff on it, and you find yourself glancing at the tempting plus button more and more until you eventually give in because, well, it's only $1 or $2, right? What's the harm? And sure, $1 or $2 for those who can spare it is typically pretty harmless. But what about when $1 or $2 turns into $20 a month, or even a week? Before you know it, you've spent hundreds of dollars on your virtual fish that don't even know your name. It's a purposefully addiction-based marketing tactic, utilizing FOMO over and over until for the right or wrong person, it can become an actual detrimental habit. And it may be unsurprising, but this tactic is only the tip of the iceberg as far as Facebook's microtransaction controversies are involved. Tons of Farmville charges onto a credit card aren't exactly ideal for someone who needs to prioritize actual bills and life expenses, but you could argue that these players with credit cards are adults and they're free to make their own grown-up decisions for better or for worse. But what about the people who have access to credit cards that aren't adults and that don't have the mental maturity or real-life experience to recognize when they're being targeted by a money-hungry corporation and preyed upon through the appeal of adding dragons to their humble farm? In early 2019, Facebook suddenly came under fire for not just marketing its games and the microtransactions in them to kids, but for intentionally tricking them into purchasing microtransactions, all while Facebook was all too aware while they were doing it. This behavior of causing kids to be tricked, or as this article puts it, that clearly started to run out of synonyms, bamboozled and hoodwinked out of their parents' money, was deemed friendly fraud, and not by the media, but by the internal employees at Facebook itself. I'm sure they never intended for this kind of thing to get out, but I bet whoever decided to literally put fraud in the nickname of one of their most common underhanded tactics must have definitely faced the Zuck's wrath. A class action lawsuit was filed by Glynis Bohannon, a mom who faced the repercussions of this friendly fraud through a credit card bill of almost $1,000. She claimed her son had asked to use her card for a $20 purchase once, but after her card was stored in the game, he kept buying more premium items. While this sounds like a misunderstanding with the kid, when she went to check up on her son's spending habits, he actually had no idea that he was charging her card. He would click on an item he wanted and immediately be given access to it, but with every click from this area of cool and exclusive items, his mom was being charged $20 per transaction. She claimed that she saw herself, it didn't ask if he wanted to pay for it, and that there wasn't even any indication he was spending money at all. She also didn't receive any receipt or confirmation per payment, which turns out was also true for about 50% of users that were spending money in Facebook's games. While these games are technically for everyone and not specifically marketed only to children, they are still very much within the reach of Facebook's minimum age users who are 13 and are obviously not set up to protect their younger users from falling into this sort of microtransaction trap. It becomes even more apparent that these games, while not technically made for kids, are still marketed and designed with kids in mind when you see games like Petville or Ninja Saga, the game that Glynis's kid was spending on. They're overly cartoony, use cute graphics and designs, and keep the gameplay pretty minimal, simplistic, and easy to understand. So easy that a child could do it. It doesn't help either that it's not just Facebook's original games that garner attention, but the countless existing games and franchises that create mobile or Facebook game versions of existing media. Popular video game titles like The Sims, Angry Birds, and Webkinz, as well as media franchises like Family Guy, Jurassic Park, and Marvel's Avengers, all have had or currently have Facebook games running on the site. While I don't have the best opinion of companies that dumb down existing products into Facebook game cash grabs that are riddled with microtransactions, I think that these companies and their games garner an even worse reputation when it's attached to the friendly fraud scandal. Even if these games weren't made with the intention of selling to kids and tricking them and their parents out of money, the mobile game format has already received backlash before this lawsuit was filed with Facebook, so I wouldn't say that any of these companies were totally blind to what they were doing. These children that ended up being suckered into spending money, sometimes thousands of dollars, like one case of $6,545 from a 15-year-old, aren't something that just happened to glide under Facebook's radar. The users of Facebook games that spent large amounts of money were often called whales internally, a term used in casinos for known high spenders that are continually given special treatment with more opportunities to continue spending. Despite these whales sometimes being recognized as minors though, refunds likely requested from now in-debt parents were rarely given out. And in general, friendly fraud that was widely recognized by Facebook internal employees was specifically upheld and supported. In one document that was required to be given out to the court for the lawsuit, a memo was sent with one of the key points being friendly fraud, what it is, why it's challenging, and why you shouldn't try and block it. So clearly, as if the nickname wasn't evidence enough, Facebook knew that this was an ongoing issue, or maybe to them it was more of just a casual occurrence, and deliberately avoided doing anything to help it in favor of making more money. And this wasn't a new occurrence either. In mid-2011, Facebook reported that just in a 3-month period, children had spent $3.6 million on Facebook games. I feel a bit better about my lack of cool farm stuff as a kid now, knowing that I would have contributed to this statistic. But it wasn't for lack of wanting or trying. I was always tempted by these microtransaction pitfalls, but fortunately was never allowed to give in. But not every kid needed to ask permission, as younger kids playing on a parent's account wouldn't be asked to confirm or authorize a purchase before making one. A handful of Facebook employees did attempt to fix the problem by offering refunds to every friendly fraud case involving a minor, and to require the first 6 digits of a credit card before a transaction could go through. But Facebook saw that this reduced the amount of children racking up a lot of money on their games without their parents' permission, obviously, and so didn't finalize these changes so that they could keep up their revenue. A court ordered Facebook to unseal documents for the lawsuit, or essentially release confidential information that was never really meant for the public. But for some legal reason that I'm sure I couldn't understand, the judge did say that Facebook could keep some of its documents sealed or partially redacted. So while we now have access to employees calling children the equivalent of high rollers and attempts at deliberately maintaining friendly fraud, there's a chance that what was released to the courts and the public isn't even the worst of it all. I'd hate to think how much deeper this rabbit hole really goes. If all of this wasn't bad enough, there's also been more ridicule towards Facebook for their games, this time due to a lot of games being fronts for data mining. Data mining, in simple terms, is the gathering of personal data from a user which can then be leaked, stolen, and/or sold to companies for profit. It's no secret that Facebook has had its fair share of controversies over whether or not the site is actually safe and if user data is private. But the Facebook games never seemed to be a major point in all of that controversy, maybe because not as many people were paying attention to them, which I guess in a few ways is just what Facebook wanted. On top of everything, also in recent years, Facebook has integrated casino-like games onto the site, which foster a place for both gamblers to indulge in a habit, and for minors, starting at, as far as Facebook can tell, 13, to be exposed to casino and gambling culture through even more bright colors, fun elements, and enticing gameplay. I guess we shouldn't really be surprised by this after they called teenagers whales. These games do work a bit differently than at actual casinos, as in you don't necessarily have to pay or wager actual money to play, but the same is true for exclusive content and items that cost exclusive currency like farm cash. The hook is that these games can always be played for free, so right from the start it's easy to think that it's a game that won't actually get any money out of you. But the longer you play, the more the FOMO kicks in, and especially with gambling games, when you hit it big on a jackpot but can't access all of your rewards, the gravitation towards a microtransaction can come a lot sooner than later. Sorry if this tarnishes your view of Facebook games forever. I too was once young, naive, and just wanted to ask Cindy for some food for my fish. It's disappointing that something that was such a big phenomenon when the games were first introduced could so quickly become a massive money sink and opportunity for greed. I couldn't tell you if Big Farmville had all of this planned out from the start, and if there was always a plan in mind, especially from Facebook, to target unsuspecting minors, steal data, and encourage addictive gameplay and spending. But I do know for sure that while it lasted, Farmville and other original Facebook games were pretty fun. Despite encouraging game requests for the purpose of hopefully gathering more money through new players, these silly games did foster a community of their own. For a little while, when LMFAO was in the top 40 and neon zebra print was fashionable, Farmville, Fishville, and all the others kind of were like their own little villes, bringing people together in a minor way, mostly just for fun. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, you can't currently play most if not all of these original Facebook games anymore, so like LMFAO and Neon Zebra Print, they're just relics and reminders of what once was. But if one of the often underappreciated and dedicated Facebook game enthusiasts eventually creates a fan-made revamp of the game, not unlike Toontown or Club Penguin rewritten, I'll definitely add you guys and let you have some of my chocolate milk and blueberries from my farm, now microtransaction free.